Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar today on how AI is revolutionizing the F&B industry, presented by SGInnovate and General Assembly. My name is Brian, and for those of you who don't know about us, we are a government-backed investor in Singapore with the mission to build deep tech innovations. At SGInnovate, our work involves connecting with the global deep tech ecosystem, working with entrepreneurial scientists to bring their innovative research from lab to market, as well as developing deep tech talent. Today, we have an amazing panel of speakers who will be discussing how companies in the F&B industry can successfully tap into the benefits of AI for their business. I would also like to encourage our audience here today to share their thoughts on this topic and engage with our speakers by using the Q&A box below. And with no further ado, I will pass the time to Seema from General Assembly. Seema, please.
Thank you so much, Brian. Welcome, everybody. My name is Seema. I am the Partnerships Manager at General Assembly Singapore. For those of you who may not be familiar with General Assembly, we are a tech education company. So we focus on full-time and part-time courses, and those are in data science, software engineering, UX design, and digital marketing. We also have shorter workshops which hone in on specific skill sets, and then we host a whole bunch of free events just like this. We partner very closely with IMDA via the TIPP program, which does allow subsidies for any of our immersives, our full-time immersives around the four that I mentioned: data science, software engineering, UX design, and digital marketing. So if you want to learn more, do check out our website. There's a whole bunch of information on there. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pass the time over to Anshul so we can talk about how AI is revolutionizing the F&B industry. Anshul, over to you.
Thanks, Seema. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for organizing this. And everyone, really a good afternoon and welcome to today's session. Hopefully, we'll have some interesting conversations about the topic today, how AI is revolutionizing the F&B industry. Before we get into that, let me introduce myself, and then I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves as well. I'm Anshul. I'm a co-founder of a company called TabSquare.ai. We provide AI-powered restaurant digitalization software for the restaurant industry, really trying to use data and AI to not only improve customer experience when you go for a meal at the restaurant, but also leveraging the capabilities to help reduce some of the pain points that the restaurant industry faces, improve their efficiency, and improve their profitability as well. Let me get the other panelists to introduce themselves.
Maybe shall I go? I'm Phil Helfried. Hello, everyone. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Ebb and Flow Group. We're a technology-driven F&B group based here in Singapore. And what we do is we build and we acquire F&B brands, a wide range ranging from FMCG products to your regular sort of ready-to-eat meals. And we also do the same for technologies, food-related technologies. And there's a range of tech that we build and acquire there as well, consumer-facing as well as operationally focused ones.
Thanks, Phil. Hi, I'm Som, the co-founder and CEO of AI Palette. At AI Palette, we help the food and beverage companies with the new product innovation. For example, if a beverage company wants to launch a new juice in a market like Thailand, our platform will help them identify what kind of juice they should launch next so that it is successful. And in order to do that, we use the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm from IMDA. So for those of you who are not familiar, IMDA is the government agency that actually develops and regulates the infocom and media sectors. So my role in IMDA is largely leading the AI program office. And the program office is actually in charge of accelerating the adoption of artificial intelligence by local enterprises. So I will be very happy to share some of the areas that we're working on along the way. And personally, for myself, I'm a very keen AI enthusiast. And I actually did some research in AI way back probably around 2 decades ago. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. So let's get started. So let's start at the basics, right? Why do we think F&B industry needs AI in the first place? If you really think about the F&B industry, it's a very high-touch industry, has been very service-driven industry. And what do we feel, whether AI makes life better or worse for the F&B owners, diners? And does it take away from the very concept of F&B, or does it add to it? We have a lot of experience on that area with the panelists here. So let me ask this question to our panelists, and then discuss this point first before we get into more details of how the AI can impact the F&B industry. Philip, why don't you take a dig at it first, since
Sure.
you have operate a lot of F&B concepts already?
Sure. Yeah, I think you raised an interesting point, or an important point, which is the high touch part and component of F&B. And the way we think about AI in F&B is really more from a decision-making perspective. So we feel that traditionally, the F&B industry is driven by very passionate chefs. So things like branding and menu creation and product development come from that same perspective, from a passion perspective. And I think the approach that Ebb and Flow tries to take is to take an approach to product development much more like a technology company. So we still want the chefs to infuse and inject their passion into the products that they make, but just to make a more informed decision. So for us, it's really about analyzing data and using AI to come to a more refined product ultimately that we know the market really wants.
Yeah, so I'll probably a little bit build up on what Phil mentioned. So absolutely, AI can help in decision making. And also one of the other reasons why we need to consider AI in today's age is because the pace of change has been pretty significant. Consumer preferences are now changing faster than ever before. So the stuff that people used to like probably last year may not be relevant today. And the way we can be on top of those kind of change and track those changes in real time, and maybe even better if we can anticipate what are those changes are coming, then as a F&B company, I can create those lineup of products and go to the market and tap when that change is already here. And the other reason, which is a strong reason on why we can look at AI now, is also because the data that we need to train the AI models and for the machine to learn is abundant now. And that was not the case several years back. So with the coming of the POS devices, the digitization of the menus, and also F&B as an industry is really popular among the consumers. So the consumers are constantly sharing the stuff that they are consuming through the different platforms that they use. So analyzing all this data, we can today identify what the consumer preferences and trends are moving, and thus aid the F&B companies to create the products which the consumers will love.
I think, well, I'm not an F&B expert myself, but I think generally coming from, from a customer experience, I think definitely that's what Som and Phil has mentioned in terms of having a more personalized approach. In fact, I think there's this term called hyper-personalization, right? It's a matter of how much can we achieve and how much investment the firms are actually getting to basically digitize their touch points so that they can acquire the data to kind of achieve this hyper-personalization impact. So as a consumer, I think definitely a lot that can be beneficiary. And if you go to a steak restaurant and then you actually get the steak done right to your own personal craving, right? And that kind of individualized experience, I think it means a lot, and it can actually help to improve the top line potentially. And I think beyond the touch point, front-facing aspect, but potentially, I think that could also be an angle from operation efficiencies. I think coming from FMCG angle, right? In terms of even from getting the right kind of supply to the kitchen, and then from the kitchen, obviously, to the plate. And I think this end-to-end concept can be very data-driven, and of course, AI can play a big part of it.
Oh, very, very valid points. And just to kind of build on to this discussion, definitely from TabSquare's perspective, right, we try to digitalize the interaction between the restaurant and the customer. And there comes the situation where you have a lot of data, both from the operations side, what is selling, how many tables are occupied, etc., but a lot of rich data from consumer behavior as well. And if you look today, it's not just the F&B industry. If you start looking a bit beyond the F&B industry, even entertainment, for example, right? When you open a Netflix app, based on the kind of content you have consumed in the past, the kind of movies, actors, genres that you have watched at Netflix, it will automatically give you recommendations of what other content might be suited to your tastes. Now, just try to bring that concept to F&B based on what I have eaten in the past, what kind of taste profile I have. If I can start, hyper personalizing the dining experience, it becomes really, really rich. And while this industry has been very high touch, what it stops at when you are doing this manually but through a staff is, okay, you can teach the staff, if a customer is ordering a beer, recommend a chicken wings to them, right? But that's great, but I don't like spicy food. I don't like chicken. I'm a vegetarian. That recommendation does not have any impact on the customer. It's a useless recommendation for me as a customer, right? But using AI technology, if we can identify that this customer actually likes vegetarian food, it's very easy to replace that recommendation of chicken wings with maybe a cheese nachos or a French fries, which makes it far more relevant even to the end customer. So when we talk about personal service, the high-touch service, that can be taken to a completely different level with hyper-personalization, even from a consumer perspective. Not only talking about the benefits that you can see from an operational perspective, decision-making, absolutely. But even from a consumer perspective, I think there's a huge scope to take the dining experience itself to the next level with hyper-personalization and taking that high-touch definition to really going to each single customer and saying, what is the best experience that I can offer you? And I mean, if you think about it, right, like the coffee shop that we really love is where I go to the coffee shop and I don't even have to order, because they already know I like my coffee with soy milk, an extra shot of espresso, and extra hot, and that's the definition of this is my this is the kind of experience I want to give each customer. With AI and data and personalization, you can actually get towards that much more than you could ever with just staff. Philip, what do you think of application of AI on the consumer side of it as well?
Yeah, I think the way I think about innovation in this context is, I guess there's product innovation and there's process innovation. And to the point of consumer-facing technologies, it's something that we are entering this year. I think AI is less relevant on the direct sort of consumer-facing, like apps, for example. From our perspective, media plays a very big role in consumer-facing technologies and applications, because we feel that currently consumers, I think, are used to scanning QR codes to see digital menus, but it doesn't make for a very immersive experience. And so, again, we think a lot about experiences as well versus just selling the product. And the idea is that these digital touch points with the consumers should really act as sort of enhancers of the dining experience versus just information transfer like a menu. But with regards to AI specifically, or data analysis, that's where I draw the distinction between product innovation and process innovation. And product innovation, I think, is probably more where AI Palette is focused on, identifying trends and then developing products that the market wants. That's something that we do as well, more for consumer, not FMCG products. And then process, I think, is one that is possibly even a little bit easier to have quick wins in. So you mentioned that data is available, operational data is available, but sometimes that's not true. Or sometimes the data is available, but it's not very legible. So I think what a lot of F&B players in Singapore have experienced in the last 12 months or so is they're on all of these different delivery platforms, Deliveroo, GrabFood, Foodpanda. And for every brand that they have, they need to have a separate tablet. Yeah. So if you operate multi-concept kitchens the way we do, what you end up with is with 9 or 12 tablets that people in the kitchen, that our staff in the kitchen have to manage. And the data is very different. The reports are, for example, very different between each of these platforms. So I think there's a lot to be done on the operational side of F&B to make kitchen operations run smoother, to make deliveries run more efficiently. I think that ultimately, obviously, the consumer ultimately benefits from that as well, right? The food arrives in a better condition, it arrives faster, you can possibly lower delivery fees, etc. So those are sort of the areas that we're looking at. But on the consumer-facing application side, like you mentioned, I think media is more of a focus for us rather than sort of classic AI, the way we would consider it.
Oh, absolutely. Let me delve a bit deeper into some of these pain points that you think that AI and data can help on from an F&B perspective. It would be great if, from your own experiences, if you can share some case studies or some areas where you have applied, data and AI capabilities. How did you do it? What were the kind of results that you saw, and where you are planning to take it next?
In terms of consumer focus, or
whichever area that you have actually applied it and seen some results.
So I mean, I think our first application of AI was through a partnership actually with a company called Scream Technologies. And so they've been our partners for about 2 years now. And what Scream do is they analyze consumer behaviors. I think they take a slightly different approach, or we take a slightly different approach to AI Palette, in that we look at consumer trends that are not necessarily specific to food and beverage. It's more overarching themes and trends. And what we do is we construct a consumer profile. And these consumer profiles are then condensed into a brief, a product brief, a brand brief, which is handed to our chefs in the kitchen, who will start developing products and crafting menus. And it's also handed to our branding and creative team. And so the idea is to use these insights based on a very specific targeted consumer persona that we've established using the AI insights, in order to develop a brand and a product that we know a certain segment is already looking. And really what it's allowed us to do is to develop these products not just in a more targeted way, but also in a faster way. So our go-to-market, again, traditionally, you'd spend a few weeks, maybe months developing a menu, then you'd find a kitchen and an outlet and think a lot of capex into setting up a restaurant. And so we avoid that by setting up small operations in a cloud kitchen, where we partition a section of an existing outlet. And that's where we run a test of these brands that we've created for delivery only. And based on the feedback, then that creates a feedback loop, which goes back into our AI.
So any example from your experience where you have helped leverage data or AI to solve some of these pain points?
Yeah, absolutely. So we identified trends in multiple ways. So one of the my favorite examples that we did recently was for one of the large confectionery companies. They wanted to understand what are the new consumption occasions that have come up post-COVID-19. So confectioneries, they're typically consumed in occasions like where you have a birthday party or wedding, where people come together and consume confectionery. But because of social distancing measures, those kind of events are becoming less and less possible. So using our technology, we were able to identify several new consumption occasions that have come out post-COVID-19. So for example, a virtual party over Zoom, or small parties at home, or backyard barbecue parties. So, and how it helped that particular companies that then they reposition their existing products, targeting those new consumption occasions, which their competition were still not tapping into. And thus, even though the usual consumption occasions are not possible, they are still able to maintain their sales.
So the analysis was in terms of how the usage occasions are changing with the same kind of products.
Yeah, so what we did was that we analyzed the data that the consumers had shared in terms of the consumption of confectionery post COVID-19 and pre-COVID-19. And when we ran the analysis, we identified this bunch of new consumption occasions which never existed before that. And then it was quite apparent that they need to go after them.
Sure. Chris, any from IMDA's perspective, have you come across any applications that you have seen really being successful and that has really helped the F&B industry?
I think coming from our perspective, we actually have a different engagement with different sectors. I think the closest to F&B that currently my team is working on is actually in the retail industries, where I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of having these customer touch points and a lot of readily available data for analysis. So right now, I think we are looking at how we are working with some of the potential platform players, for example, like points of sales platform players, to kind of co-develop a new kind of recommendation engine, including more advanced functionalities such as smart reward, right, which can be potentially implemented. And I think that is the kind of angle that we are looking at to capitalize on the access of data. I think from the initial tests and studies, I think there are really a lot of positive feedback coming from some of these implementations, right? And perhaps also to draw a little bit from my previous experience before I joined IMDA, I think I came from also a very consumer-facing industry from a telco, actually. So probably some of you might have known that telco is very big into a lot of this analysis of the consumer data, because the whole overall customer journey means a lot to us. And then at the same time, there's a lot of ways to actually capture all these touch points. So the entire customer journey is actually captured, and we can actually use it to develop new so-called products, right? That is more tailored to certain segments. And I think those are the very down-to-earth and grounded applications of AI in the so-called the consumer-facing side of the business.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I mean, as I was sharing from our own experience and what we have kind of implemented at our restaurants, we two parts to it, right? One is the operational part, what Philip was also talking about. Really, I think to make AI implementable or leveraging the power of AI, what comes first is really the data. So from an operational perspective, as Philip was saying, today, leveraging TabSquare technology, you can not only connect with the consumers in store, but on your own online channel or on any of the delivery platforms, all through one device, one menu as well. So what you were talking about, Philip, you really don't need 10, 15 devices anymore. You can see all the orders coming from all different channels, third-party channels, your own online shop, as well as in-store. You can see all those orders in one place. And that gives a lot of interesting insights, not only in terms of what is your sales and trends, etc., but really what is your kitchen utilization, for example. So today you can track my kitchen, my restaurant might not be full at a particular period in time, but my kitchen is overutilized because there are hundreds of orders coming from the different delivery platforms and my own online delivery solution as well. So that is more on in terms of the operational and data analysis part. But as I was talking earlier, what we have also tried to do is really look at what consumers are ordering when they're dining across different platforms, and trying to understand and creating like a food profile. It's not in terms of a persona or a large segment, but really creating an individual food profile for each consumer, trying to see what are the taste profile, what is the flavor profile, what is the typical kind of proteins that they prefer, carb profile, etc., the baking style or the cooking style that they prefer, and really creating almost like a a food persona by customer, and then trying to also create what we call in our language almost like a dish DNA, where every dish is divided into 400 plus factors, really understanding the ingredients, the cooking style, the flavor profile, and then we try to match that with the consumer persona. And the menu that you look at might be different from the menu that Chris looks at in the restaurant, so that instead of trying to look through 150, 200 items in the menu, the system automatically is able to pull out which are the items that are more, which you will have more affinity towards. And same applies to even giving recommendations when you're ordering a particular dish, which other dish might go well with that. So really a personalized recommendation engine as well. And at least for now, what we see across the restaurants where we have implemented these systems, we have seen almost 15 to 20% increase in average spend by consumers in those restaurants as well. So again, one of the case examples where we have really leveraged AI technology to not only improve the customer experience, but at the same time improve the profitability by increasing the revenue for the restaurants as well. Again, many such applications we see of AI in F&B. This is just one example that we have been working on for a couple of years now. Okay, before I move forward in our discussion, let me take a few questions that some of the participants have raised, some of the audience has raised. Alan asks, assuming the technology consumer industry are ready, what is holding the transformation back? Chris, you want to give it a go first, because you see it across many different industries as well.
Thanks, Anshu. I think, okay, first of all, I think coming from the government's perspective, we have actually done very regular assessment of the overall digital landscape in Singapore. And we recognize that, largely from the local enterprise point of view, there is still kind of a big gap and still pretty nascent in terms of AI adoption. And I think generally speaking, I think when we look at it, dive deeper, we recognize that there are several key kind of issues that we need to address. I think first of all, I think as what Phil might have alluded to, the key part about AI adoption is actually about the data availability. And not all enterprises are actually in a ready state to kind of have a really clean data for AI and ML. The reason is because even if they have a lot of digital touch point, they may not have organized the data and store the data and manage the data in an efficient way so that they can actually build services on top of it or applications on top of it. So that's actually a big part of so-called the hurdles that some of the local enterprises are facing. And of course, with data comes with the cost of implementations of such a data architecture, right? The second potential reason with regards to holding this transformation back is it could be due to the lack of manpower, because a lot of these enterprises, the core focus is largely in the business, like in this case is F&B, right? So it will be a little bit odd to expect a restaurant to kind of like have an AI expert within the restaurant organization. So how do we actually help some of these local players? That's where, from the government standpoint, actually, that's where we want to drive new programs to kind of avail some of these services as a common digital services or some kind, even from a data point of view, to avail to the industry some kind of a digital commons to help uplift our local players in terms of adoption of AI. So that is another angle, so-called the lack of resources from a manpower and also from an asset standpoint. Yeah. So just broadly speaking, from the perspective of IMDA.
Philip, so would you like to contribute to that?
Let me add to it because that's one of the things that I also face when I try to work with the clients. So, I mean, to build upon what Chris mentioned about the challenges when it comes to building a AI solution for the internal data, I'll also talk a little bit about when you don't need the data yourself from the company. The data is already available out there and you can build the models and help them use that solution. So there are a few challenges that we see always, the similar challenges across multiple players. So first of all is the in general impression of AI. So people have very different impressions of AI. Probably you have to blame the Hollywood movies for it. On one side, we see the supercomputers which have answered to everything. And on the other hand, we have the Terminators which will take over humanity. But the reality, as we know, that it lies somewhere in between. So the first of all, for a lot of people, there is the fear of AI or the limitation in terms of the understanding of AI. And for those who are open to adopt AI solution, they also need to understand the limitations of AI, that AI cannot function independently today. You need to use the AI along with the human intelligence. AI can only give you the information, but the ultimate decision needs to be made by you. So there is a gap in terms of understanding of the AI among the general population. And finally, the biggest hurdle is the mindset of the people. People by nature are resistant to change. If a particular way has worked for them for several years, changing them into a new way of looking things and trying things, it's another challenge when it comes to adaptation of a very new technology like AI, where you have to completely change and rewire yourself the way you do certain things.
I mean, I think the common theme which we experienced in the past as well is, again, the absence of data in a usable form, right? The companies who have the data are not doing anything with it. The companies who are doing something with it don't have the data. So there is a huge disconnect between having the data in a clean form and being able to use that, and which becomes a huge impediment. I mean, from TabSquare's perspective, I can say, thankfully, from our because we are into digitalizing the restaurant industry, we get a lot of data, and hence that problem is less acute for us. But definitely, I can imagine a lot of companies who are building AI products, the absence of data in a usable form takes a huge amount of effort to get into that form, and then only you can actually leverage that. Philip, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything I think that we've just mentioned. I also see a very big disconnect between people who build and companies who build AI solutions and technologies in general, and F&B operators. So F&B operators traditionally just aren't exposed to these kind of new solutions. They've not used technology in the past. And beyond the POS system, the point of sale system, and some of the delivery platforms, that's really the exposure that they're limited to. And so we're a bit uniquely positioned because we operate outlets and brands and kitchens ourselves, as well as building the tech. And so the approach that we've always taken is, and to the point of data, who looks at the data? And it's not the chefs. The chefs are not meant to look at the data. The chefs don't really care what data you're gathering either. They just want the system that they're using to work. And so we don't want to design stuff that looks fancy to engineers. We want to build something that chefs find is very useful and usable. And so in designing, and in particular on the operational side, designing any of, for example, our kitchen management software, which is a platform that all of our kitchens are currently using. So they use iPads basically to process all of the orders. And so we go paperless. And those systems are designed, not from the ground up by the engineers and our product designers, but we actually sit down with the chefs and say, what is your workflow like? And let's build something that matches your workflow instead of forcing them into a new workflow, because you'll just face a lot of resistance. The other thing that I find interesting is how people perceive data. And I've noticed that a lot of people, so if you run an AI engine and it gives you some insights, if they seem true, if they seem obvious, then the normal reaction is, well, I knew that already. And if the insights seem very innovative and radical, they say, well, it can't be true. And so the challenge is as well, first of all, believing the AI, because obviously it is crunching data, and it is true, certainly statistically speaking. And then how do you communicate the insights generated by the AI such that everyone in the organization buys into the idea? Because if they don't buy in, then there's really no point. Then the engineers are happy and the data scientists are happy, but the business decisions are not made based on that data.
No, absolutely true, Philip. We see that quite a bit as well. And adding on to what Chris said earlier, right? I think the one part of the problem is the data, and the second part of the problem is also how do you use it? Okay, chefs can't use it. You have a team that can help them understand the output and then use it. But what about small mom and pop stores? How can you make data and AI capabilities available to them? That needs to be done at scale, and you can't expect them to have a data scientist sitting inside their in their organization, because probably they are managing the restaurant themselves and probably serving the food. They can't afford to have a data scientist sitting and doing that analysis. And I think the role as an industry player, we also need to start looking at and playing is how can we make this into a more scalable system, right? For example, at TabSquare, at least what our attempt is that you have large chains like McDonald's, etc., right? Like they have actually bought a AI company which does the personalization and everything, and they can pay $300 million to get that capability. But the next door cafe does not even have $300 to pay for that capability, right? So really, how can you make AI available in a form where the capabilities, the technology is available in a form where it's as simple as subscribing to it, where I say, okay, yes, I want to leverage these technologies. I want to look at this data. I want to leverage this to impact my restaurant operations. Can it be made into a kind of almost like a subscription-based model where it's available to even the smallest hawker's stall if required, right? And our attempt at TabSquare has been to really, we have a huge team of data scientists, but always the attempt is not to create specific solutions for one large chain, but really a solution which is applicable. It may not be applicable to 100% of the types of restaurants at this point in time, but at least the attempt is how can we make it mass? How can we make it available to the smallest shop that wants to embark upon the journey? But where we struggle, and I think IMDA does play an important role in pushing that objective as well, is really awareness. We have been able to find a solution for data. Our solutions give us enough data. We have been able to find a solution to how to make them use it because we have built the system in a way where it is scalable. But the biggest problem comes in awareness, where how do I teach the small coffee shop owner saying that AI and data is important, it can improve your operations, because right now in his mind he's struggling with, oh, I need my staff to make my food, I need to collect my money, I need to manage these delivery orders that are coming from Grab, Food Panda, Deliveroo. So how do you educate them in terms of understanding that this can actually help your business and it's simple to adopt? And it doesn't sound like, as someone was saying, Bollywood science fiction kind of a concept that, oh no, it is not for me. It is not applicable in my context. So I think a lot more work needs to be done in that space as well. And I think IMDA has been with the entire DRB scheme, etc. There was a full section on just use AI and use data and leverage it to whatever extent. I think a lot of restaurants have taken advantage of that, but a lot more still needs to be done in that area, at least what we are seeing as well. Okay, let me take it's been a very heavy discussion, so let me take a bit more tongue-in-cheek question from Tang. They're asking, can an AI chef win a future edition of Masterchef? Philip, I think this question, Philip and Som, you are the best guys to answer that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would defer to one of my earlier points around experience. and it's really what the consumer wants. So can an AI in future create new dishes, very tasty dishes by itself? Probably, I would say. But I think that's ignoring the fact that I think consumers really experience food in a very unique way versus other products, right? So it's sort of, we think of food bringing people together, right? So you go dine out with your friends and you meet new people, you go for drinks. And so I think a human element is it's not a question of whether it's possible. I think it's people want that human element, which is why even in the age of QR codes and digitization, you still see most restaurants and dine-in locations having staff, because people just like to be welcomed at the door. That would be my answer.
So come on.
I'll answer it in a slightly different way. So in the immediate future, I don't think that AI will be able to win the Masterchef, but I'm pretty sure the next Masterchef would be somebody who would use AI. So I see the future in such a way where along with the chef, there would be a data scientist who will be working in his laptop and will come out with the list of ingredients that he should use. And then the chef, he takes it up and goes to the kitchen and does his magic.
Yeah. I would say we are still a bit further away from letting our AI chef win the Masterchef. I mean, we see that in our just trying to think through what best dishes to recommend itself is a huge task, right? Because out of the 200 items, which are the items that particular customer might like, that itself is quite a task. And I think what Philip was pointing out as well, it's not just about putting the ingredients together, but what goes well with that. So it still needs a bit of further development, I think, from an AI perspective before we can get a AI master chef. Okay, let me answer one, take up another question from Tanya. Can you talk about some use cases on how you have leveraged in-menu QR code ordering platforms to generate insights and implement better CX, personalization, cross-sell, upsell opportunities? I think I spoke about that a little while back. So what we do is that really looking at consumer behavior in terms of what they are ordering at different points in time, and really breaking it down into creating a profile for the customer, saying that these are the top taste profiles that they like, these are the top protein profiles they like, etc., and trying to match that. And in terms of the ordering interface, the way it looks like is, one, it remembers what you like to order, right? So if you, as I was explaining, if you like your coffee with soy milk, extra espresso, extra shot of espresso and extra hot, it remembers all of that. But beyond that, based on what you have ordered in the past, it will also give you recommendations from the menu that that you might like at that particular restaurant. And the entire interface is actually changed for each customer, in a sense that maybe for me, a beef burger is the top recommended item in the menu, but for Chris, for example, it could be a chicken stew, for example. I'm just taking an example, Chris. But really, what we are able to do is really the entire UI and UX is based on data and the customer profile and personalization for that particular customer. In fact, we have gone to an extent of we are actually able to now even create dynamic promotions for each customer dynamically as well. So maybe the restaurant wants to give $2 off on a beverage, but Som likes green tea, Chris likes soda, and Philip likes a juice, right? It is actually, our system is actually able to see what is the best personalized dish or the beverage that can be given as a promotion to that customer, such that one, he has a better experience, but two, the restaurant also sees much better adoption of the kind of promotions that they want to run. So these are some of the examples of how personalization of the user experience of promotions, of the recommendations that you give can actually improve the experience for the customer and help the restaurants make some more money as well. Okay, so I think we have had quite an interesting discussion, but what I would love to also understand is where do you see the future, right? Like, where do you see today? We are struggling with a lot of issues in terms of data, in terms of scalability, in terms of awareness, etc. But let's try to take a view 3 years, 5 years down the line. Where do you see what kind of role AI playing in the F&B industry?
I think AI currently, this is something that we've mentioned, that the people using and looking at the data are engineers, data scientists, and I don't think that the future is especially for the mom and pop stores that we mentioned, is the higher data scientists. I think the future is for AI to develop to a point where no one actually has to analyze the data per se, because the AI solves for the problem itself. So if we operationally take an example, if a kitchen platform is connected to an inventory management system, for instance, after you sell out certain items on particular days, after a certain amount of time, obviously through machine learning, I suppose, the platform just becomes smarter. So it can predict on certain days you're bound to sell out of certain items. And instead of having a report that then someone has to analyze and then manually go and procure new items, the system can automatically reorder. And I think that's also sort of the answer to the question, how to deploy AI for sort of the mass market. I think that's the answer, is that it sort of works by itself and in the background. It's not meant to be in the face of people operating in the kitchen and in the face of people who interface with clients and customers on a daily basis. It's meant to make their life easier, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with what Phil mentioned. And with time, in the next 5 years, what do you expect is that the novelty of AI will wear off. People will get a better understanding of the technology, what it can offer. And basis that, then we will see it being adapted through SaaS solutions, primarily, where you don't need a team. You just plug it to your system, and then it pulls the data and gives you the output in a format which you can use to make the decisions and what steps to be taken next.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in agreement with the other panelists. I think in the future, I think we can actually take a lift, let's say from some of the cloud service provider, especially the large e-commerce platform players, right? I think it's very clear if you are a seller on those platforms, it's very clear that you do not really need to know AI, or probably you're not even aware of it, right? They will already be giving you the reports or the recommendation based on the intelligence that they possess from trillions of data points on an every minute or second basis. So I think the important thing is that how can we actually make such an environment happen in Singapore, right? How can we actually allow the mom and pop shop to achieve this kind of experience without kind of letting them go into the nuts and bolts of these technologies, and also at the same time making it fit into the business case, right? Because we know that the business case of a restaurant or F&B outlet is clearly different from, let's say, a tech companies, right? So the whole business case is very, very different. So I think from our perspective, I think when we drive AI adoption from a government standpoint, I think we recognize that there's a very important need to address this kind of various dimensions. And of course, from our point of view in the future, we hope that right now we are also working with certain companies that we feel that they can eventually be the lighthouse per se. So we hope that through these lighthouse use cases, we can actually help to proliferate the value proposition to the rest of the sectors or the clusters. And of course, hopefully, we can actually achieve some of these downstream benefits for all the companies in Singapore. And yeah, so that's the kind of hopefully the landscape that we want to see. Yeah.
Super. I mean, I think our view about AI and data really, I would say two parts. One, the data itself. I think in the next few years, we will start seeing the data aggregation where all the different sources of data start coming together, and companies can have access to that, wherein someone is able to develop new solutions on top of that data lake, so to speak, much more easily. The second is that in terms of applications of AI, we personally see the application of AI and data in almost every aspect of the restaurant operations. Today, we just are talking about defining how the menu could look like, leveraging the chefs, the data and the chef's capabilities. We are talking about personalizing the experience when the customer is going to the restaurant and ordering from there. But going forward, we really believe that in every aspect, whether it is being able to forecast the inventory, what Philip was also mentioning, how much would I need in the next day, next 2 days, next week, and being able to optimize inventory, be able to optimize capacity utilization. I know what my trends of how many tables are occupied inside the restaurant, how many orders are coming, etc., and really being able to leverage the data to optimize that as well. That data being connected to different promotion platforms, where if I know that my capacity is going to be lower, utilization is going to be lower for the next week, I can actually run some promotions on the connected platforms and drive some more people to my restaurants. It can be even in terms of pricing, where at different times of the day, different the days of the week, the pricing can automatically, like if you look at the airline or hospitality industry, the pricing is dynamic. Something to that extent, where the pricing within the restaurant can be dynamic as well, depending on the time of the day of the week, and the customer base, etc. as well. So really, in every aspect of F&B industry, we see that the application of AI is going to reduce these pain points and make it much more innovative as we go forward. At least that's what our view and vision is. We have a few minutes left, so I want to discuss one last point with this panel, is on the risks. Everything is great, like there's amazing amount of benefits, and we are seeing some changes in the industry is slowly turning towards AI and data usage. But what risks do we see in this space by leveraging more and more data and AI in this space? Any comments on that would be interesting.
Perhaps I'll take a quick step at it. I think from our understanding, I think there's really a lot that we need to put in place in order for the whole ecosystem and environment to have this adoption in AI coming from the end of this risk that you mentioned. I think first of all, I think we have to ensure that AI is trustworthy, right? And ethical use of AI is very, very important, because increasingly, as we mentioned, if you want a seamless experience, then in a way AI will be a black box, right? And so in a way, the system, whatever thing that you see from the system needs to be fair. I think that there are already a lot of overseas cases whereby there are certain ethical issues with the use of AI, right? Certain races are being discriminated, and things like that. So I think at least from IMDA standpoint, we're also working on it. We also have take a very concerted studies from not just from the so-called the policy standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint, how to implement AI in such a way that is more transparent, more trustworthy, and at the same time we can actually hopefully explain certain parts of these AI processes. So I think that's coming from a broad overview perspective.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with all of those points. And I think I come back to the point of experience, just because I guess we Ebb and Flow, we experience it every day because we're consumer facing. I think the idea of sort of reducing a dining experience to something that's sort of almost clinical is just not very appealing. I think people like the idea of having a very personal experience. Something like, people like to create memories when they go out for dinners, birthday dinners, celebrations, those kind of things. And I think one of the risks is that AI removes that somewhat. So it becomes a little bit too rigid.
Yeah, so to add on to the other points that have been mentioned by the panelists, so the other risk that I see is that not finding the right balance with AI. So it might happen that people try AI and they completely shun AI. They say, no, this doesn't work. Or the other side, too extreme, where people go just by what the AI is saying. I think it's important to find the right balance, as that I had mentioned earlier. AI on its own is today not going to work. You need to find the right balance where you have the input from the AI and then the human is able to make a decision basis that.
Interesting. I think the from our perspective, I think one of the big risks, definitely the points that you guys mentioned make a lot of sense, but the safety and security of the data may also become extremely important, because when you start moving towards a more open data economy, a misuse of that data can be quite dangerous as well, and that will again really hamper the overall confidence on moving towards that journey as well. So I think data safety, etc., will need to be extremely important as we grow the AI capabilities for the industry. Okay, we have a couple of minutes left, so let me take a couple more questions. There's a question from Han. With all the benefits of AI for the consumers, the staff, the operators, is the so what? Bottom line answer then be improving revenue profit at the end of the day, or at least for the most part? Any of you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think the idea is that it helps improve margins ultimately. So it helps drive financial performance, whether that's improving revenues through having better products and a better product offering, or whether it's through operational efficiencies that allow you to reduce wastage, improve the lifespan of certain products that you buy. So it should be definitely in both directions, I would say.
Chris, Som, would you like to add anything to it?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of, I think we have to be very clear in terms of the use case. That's why when we go about engaging the industries to kind of convince them to use AI, we make it very clear that a very feasible business case needs to be established. So in this business case, right, basically we have to ensure that, for example, if it's a recommendation engine, we have to ensure that there is certain kind of upside at the end of the day that can be achieved. The company can actually, get increase in revenue because of cross-selling or upselling kind of functionalities. And those are very important factors. And also, as what Phil mentioned, the other angle is also about cost efficiencies. So when we, for example, engage with the supply chain companies, those companies are actually, there's really a lot of very critical problem statement that we are actually working on to improve their overall operation efficiencies through the use of AI and data. So when we put all this into the business case, and it will be then very clear to their stakeholders, especially the people that's actually going to put the dollar, to say that, okay, I'm willing to take this journey, and it's not just about the government giving me a one-time grant, but I will actually want to sustain this adoption in the years to come, even after the grant finishes. So this is the kind of narrative that we are looking into.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, any solution that you adopt, either it should help you in increasing revenue or reduce the cost. If it doesn't do either, then it will be a white elephant.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I mentioned earlier, from our experience where we have implemented our AI system, we have seen almost 15 to 20% higher average check for the for the customers ordering through the AI-based recommendation engine and menu engineering. and that has improved the revenue for the restaurants and also the profitability. Because increasing the revenue by even 5% adds a lot to their profitability. So we have actually seen results of AI implementations and delivering additional value to the bottom line and the top line for the restaurants as well. Okay, I think that's our time. It's 4 o'clock, so I wouldn't take more questions. Brian, I hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anshu. I would like to thank all our speakers today, Som, Philip, Chris, and Anshu, for sharing their valuable insight and knowledge. I also like to give out a shout out to General Assembly for their help organizing this event. For our audience today, do take note that we'll be sending out a post-event email with all the important information you could need, including a recording for this webinar. So do keep an eye out for that. And with that, we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. And on behalf of SGInnovate, I would like to wish you all a great week ahead. And we look forward to seeing you all again at our next event. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.